Hello and welcome to the Edufuturists podcast. This is episode 172. If you missed last week's, go and check it out. Episode 171 was with Bob Miles, the CEO of Salad.com, a company that is using Web3 technologies to harness the power of gaming computers around the world. We didn't really talk about that much, but we talked a lot about blockchain and Web3, so if that interests you, go and check that out. Lots of really good podcasts recently and lots coming up as well. But today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. No guests, it's just myself, Stephen and Ben. And we're
Stephen?
going to do
Is it Sunday?
What's going on? I never went to church.
And yeah, so...
Might not have been here last week, by the way. I need to put it on this little bit here. I'll have to put Stephen next time. Sorry. Go on, Gavin. Sorry, disrupted you.
No, that's all good, man. It's good to have you two back. I was doing it myself last week.
Yeah.
I was in Ireland, and speaking of Ireland, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
We should all be drinking Guinness as we're doing this one. Anybody got one?
No, but I don't want to say I've got cans of it in the fridge because that makes it worse. Because I think Irish people would find it worse that you've got cans of Guinness in the fridge. So,
have they got have they got widgets in them?
Pardon?
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably.
I still find that fascinating when you get a can with a widget in it.
Don't. Let's not.
If you get a widget, what is it? Is it like some kind of special?
Have you not heard of it?
You're only winding up, of course I am.
Yeah. Keeps it fresh or whatever it does, frizzy or whatever else it does. Yeah.
You've made me think. I don't think I've had a can of beer with a widget in since I was a teenager.
Yeah. It did used to be
Does
quite
it
cool.
even exist, or is it something different?
Who knows? I reckon if we had like a little, do you know, like Joe Rogan has Jamie in the background doing like little. We need a little Googler to Google it in the background. I reckon. Anyway, should we get on? We're talking about stuff that we should talk about, like on the podcast and whatever else. Have you mentioned like subscribing on YouTube and all that kind of stuff, Dan?
Did you know that? People don't need to do that, do they?
Yeah, of course they do.
Do they?
Yeah, of course
subscribe.
They do. Press subscribe. Press the button. Edufuturists.com / Oh no, YouTube. Something to do with Edufuturists. Just Google Edufuturists.
YouTube.com / Edufuturists. Yeah, or go to Edufuturists.com. It's all on there.
www.edufuturists.com. Is that the one?
That's the one, Steve.
So, right, I'm going to just put it out there. Yeah, go subscribe. You've mentioned that you talked about all of these different things last week, but I think we need a recap. So let's go into, before we start delving in and going into part 2 and start unpicking what it looks like and all of the different things and the great topics we're going to go into. Let's recap for, if somebody's listening to this for the first time, what does Web3 technologies actually mean? What does it actually look like and what is it?
So episode 167 was when we kind of did an overview, didn't we, of just what we're observing in terms of Web3 technology. And hopefully today we're going to look at what the implications could be for education. Yeah, I guess, to bring it back down to kind of what we talk about.
I suppose the key difference between Web 2 and Web 3, and most people say, and we kind of talked about this in the last podcast, is Web 2 is primarily the majority. The Web 1 was the origin of the internet, lots of developers, and it was more democratized, the internet, more involvement. Web 2 was a movement towards bigger players, kind of not controlling the internet, but certainly a lot. They're like the gatekeepers of it. Your people like your Googles or your Facebook, Metas, all those kind of people. Web 3, which is where we believe things are going, and things are already starting to go, is more moving back to that level of decentralization and a movement towards, rather than the mass market controlling, or not the mass market, the big conglomerates controlling the internet. It's the movement away from it towards more of probably that phrase, democratization of the internet. That kind of summarizes it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess from the user point of view, Web 1, you consumed content. Web 2, you created content, social media, you added your own stuff to it. You created your own YouTube videos like this one. Web 3 is ownership of the content on the internet. all backed by blockchain technology. So essentially decentralized ledger. Think of a spreadsheet that keeps a record of everything. However, if we had a spreadsheet, it would be kept primarily in one place, owned by one person. However, with blockchain technology, it's stored on thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of thousands of people's computers all around the world. So if one of those computers tries to change the ledger, it gets rejected by the others because it doesn't match the others. Very simplistic, I think. I mean, it's not when you get into it.
It's not when you try and work on it, and the nodes and the blockchain and the whole verification and all the stuff that goes with it. But the theory, that's it simplified. So
clever. And a lot of people think of Bitcoin when they think of blockchain. I was reading something the other day that somebody had said that Bitcoin was kind of the first real use case of blockchain. And kind of brought it to the fore, and and I guess when you look at how secure it can make something, I guess if a record of information is held by one company, it's as secure as that company want it to be, but at the end of the day, they have ownership of it. They can do what they want with it. A decentralized ledger, which is essentially it's coding. Which is what blockchain is ultimately secure, really, because any changes get rejected, and so it's like what you were saying, Ben, a fully democratized level of ownership.
And there's definitely, in terms of the challenges that this creates in a world, and it'll create challenges in terms of finance. And we're seeing a lot of that at the moment. Obviously, I know it was mentioned on last week's episode with Bob from Salad, the executive order from Joe Biden in the US and the changes that are potentially on the horizon about regulation. It wasn't the US haven't said they're going to regulate any kind of like cryptocurrencies or finance that's decentralized, but there is conversation now about how that works, and any of you who are into this, if you Google any conversations about Ripple and what's changing in the US, that's changing. But there's challenges financially, there's challenges in terms of like ownership and governance that we talked about, and we hopefully want to talk about today in terms of what that could look like for education as well, because the implications here aren't just that, we're moving away from a central or conglomerate owned internet. We're talking about an opportunity to create equitable access to stuff and make it available. I think, Dan, I don't want to steal any thunder, but I know you talked a lot about this around how it creates more fairness and access to financial systems and stuff like that, doesn't it? Or potentially does anyway.
I guess if you want to know more about that, I think sorry, got a bit of a cough there. There's a great TED talk by a guy called Charles Hoskinson from 2014 maybe, or 16, which is a long time ago in the world of blockchain and cryptocurrencies. But he talks about. In fact, he was one of the early guys with Vitalik Buterin, who created Ethereum, the second biggest cryptocurrency in the world. And he created his own cryptocurrency as well, which is, the name's just gone out of my head there. What's it called? ADA, but that's not its name.
Mate, I don't know. And Steve's staying on mute on purpose. He's Googling it as we speak.
I'm going to Google it.
The Association of Digital. I have no idea.
Cardano. That's the one.
Yeah.
Cardano.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Really sorry about that one, Dan.
So he kind of talks about back in the early days, which is literally not that long ago, a couple of years ago, of cryptocurrencies, about how the blockchain technology can bring centralized services that people in developing countries, people who are kind of more off the grid, can't access because basic things like in if you've ever been involved with even something like a homeless charity in the UK where we're based, there's a lot of services you can't even access without a home address. So there's a lot of services that, in terms of insurance, in terms of banking, in terms of proof of ownership, that a more decentralized system brings, and even things like the internet as well. And we talked about that last week as well, how a decentralized system can bring the internet. Because if you think about it, our internet comes from a centralized provision, doesn't it? It comes from
servers.
And yeah, but actually, if it's transferred via computer to computer, almost like a web of computers bringing you access to that database, then you would just have to be within close proximity of another computer to get it. If an internet,
so it's a little bit like tapping into your neighbour's Wi-Fi network.
Exactly, yeah.
but in an ethical way, in a way that actually will help people rather than being a bit dodgy.
And I suppose that's how a lot of blockchain works. It's using the processing power of computers in a secure way, I guess. And if the episode last week was talking about how Solid harness unused computing power from people, bring it together, and then use that computing power to provide proof of work on blockchain, and similar with in terms of the storage of the ledgers, and in terms of the if there was a decentralized internet as well.
But I think it's worth also mentioning here, obviously, this is very much in its infancy, and we're talking about it like 2022, and I forgot what year it was then. But like, it's not been going around. It's not been going on. The conversation about this has been going on for a while, and obviously the establishment of Bitcoin was 10 years ago. 10 years ago,
2009.
All right, so 13 years ago. So just a little bit older than that. But it's still not made mainstream. Conversations about things like NFTs, which is probably going to come up today, cryptocurrencies, DAOs, all those kind of things, is coming up, and he's become prevalent probably in the last 2 years, 3 years maybe. But like, big news is happening all the time on this stuff, and some of this stuff is moving at a pace that you can not even imagine, and like some really powerful, exciting things happening, like stuff that's happening in Mexico around about recipients being able to use crypto and then bring it out and put it into Mexican pesos. Conversations more recently, and we know the horrific things that are happening in the Ukraine currently, and what that's then meant with executive orders that have allowed crypto to be used within Ukraine, or certainly crypto donations be able to come into the Ukrainian government, and other things like that. But there's other countries that are starting to seriously think about this, and actually so much so that it's helping us to think about really positive ways that this can make a difference. And I think we all talk quite a lot about our mutual friend, good friend of the podcast, David Price, who the book The Power of Us, that we must have referenced 100 times on the podcast, talking about this idea of the power of collaboration and the working togetherness of this. And I think actually what Web3 allows for, and kind of advocates, and actually it's like a given, a necessity that doesn't work without this level of collaboration and democratization and kind of development of equity. So I think that resonates with us as Edufuturists, but I think it resonates with so many more people because it's about fairness and treating people right.
Yeah, what are you thinking, Steve?
Yeah, it just blows my mind a little bit, if I'm honest. So you guys have delved into it, and I've definitely a greater understanding of it than I. And I think that it brings a fear, doesn't it? You know, like anything of change brings a real fear, and a lot of it is kind of fear and misunderstanding, and definitely lack of knowledge around what it is and the potential of it. And I know we've mentioned it before, the kind of the rise of the internet, and I think Dan, you shared a video, you know, the where, like, you know, like Gates and everybody else being mocked, basically saying, "Well, oh my God, you're going to do this," and actually, we're in an environment now where people are kind of seeing this as that. But as Ben just said, it's not new though. Like some of this stuff is actually has been around for a while. It's just coming to the surface and bubbling up now, for whatever reason. And I think people think it was like invented yesterday. People maybe think it was like online learning as a response to the pandemic, which is a complete myth. But people think, it's just created now, and it's feared because actually it's not established and it literally could fall over tomorrow. Where actually the whole thinking and everything behind it isn't.
No, absolutely.
It's an established theory and it's developing. It's just that people are starting to hear it and it's becoming, like I say, into the mainstream and people are having more conversations about it than they did.
Yeah. I've just pulled it up. Should we show it?
Yeah, show it. Yeah, good idea.
Because I think what you said is interesting in terms of that kind of. So this was filmed in 1995. A lot of people think that blockchain technology is kind of at the 1995 stage of the internet. And if you think actually by 2008, Steve Jobs announced the iPhone. So if you go from literally within 13 years from the level of the internet where it was in 1995 to where it was just 13 years. And if you think actually there's 13 years isn't a long time, you're just saying 13 years since Bitcoin was launched, where the internet went from
numbers.
But I think what it says to me is that if we are in that kind of stage of the internet in the late 90s or the mid 90s, then in 10 years time, there's going to be uses and there's going to be different ways of using this technology that we're talking about now, Web3 style technology, that we can't even conceive of. If you think of where the internet went in terms of the expansion of Google, like you were saying before, but the technology that goes into that, even Netflix back in the late 90s, the being able to say, there'll be a streaming service that's bigger than any network television channel, and it's on demand and it uses machine learning to bring things what you want to watch from around the world. It's inconceivable, really, from a late 90s mind. But actually, the internet had been around since the late 70s, isn't it? Late 70s, early 80s, something like that. So if you think when the video clip we're going to show, the internet's probably already about 15, 20 years old. So I think just probably emphasising what you're saying, Ben, about how, although it's been around 13 years, blockchain was still kind of in its infancy, really. And maybe it is the next 10 years where we're going to actually start seeing where this stuff can go. Yeah, should we play it just because it's good entertainment as well? Hopefully you can hear it. I'm getting a message on my computer saying, asking me to open system preferences to allow sharing. So if you can't hear it, just let me know.
I can't hear it.
Sure.
What the hell is that exactly?
Well, it's become a place where people are publishing information.
Right.
So everybody can have their own homepage. Companies are there, the latest information. It's wild what's going on. You can send electronic mail to people. It is the big new thing.
Yeah, but it's easy to criticize something you don't fully understand, which is my position here.
Go ahead.
But I can remember a couple of months ago, there was like a big breakthrough announcement that on the internet or on some computer deal, they were going to broadcast a baseball game. You could listen to a baseball game on your computer. And I just thought to myself, does radio ring a bell? You know what I
mean? There's a difference.
There is a difference.
It's not a huge difference.
What is the difference?
But you can listen to the baseball game whenever you want.
Right.
Too.
Oh, I see. So it's stored in one of your memory deals,
Exactly.
and then you can come
That's
back
the
a year
RAM
later.
thing you talked about earlier.
Yeah. Do tape recorders ring a bell? I just don't know. What can you, just knowing me, the little you know me now, what am I missing here? What do I need?
Well, if you want to learn about the latest cigars or auto racing
Right.
statistics.
Well, I've got that covered. I subscribe to 2 British magazines devoted entirely to motorsports, and I call the Quaker State Speed Line about 2 times a half hour. So now, would the computer give me more than I'm getting that way?
Oh, you can find other people who have the same unusual interests you do. And
You mean the troubled loner chat room on the internet?
absolutely.
Fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? Thinking about Bill Gates like trying to defend something and talking about very, very simple concepts. And now look, like just this, what we are doing right now, we live in different parts of the UK, and because of the power of the internet, we can do stuff like this. And this is just touch the tip of the iceberg, isn't it, in comparison to what is already here and what is already come and what is about to come.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the advancement of technology as well is getting faster. So it might not even take the next 13 years. We could be looking at the next 5 years that industries around the world are majorly disrupted by this technology, majorly disrupted. And I guess 20 minutes in, how is it going to disrupt education? How is it going to disrupt? Because let's be honest, this whole podcast is about the fact that we think education needs disrupting. We think that actually has education even evolved over the last 100 years? Never mind the next 10 years.
It's a really, and this is not, I suppose, the statement outright is to say that we're not criticising any particular thing, like an awarding body, potentially government. It's more actually the whole being, and we understand the challenges and complexities of it. But if you take awarding bodies, I've just said that and then literally let me go. But I don't know whether it's still the case, because I know I'm a little bit removed from education. But what used to really amaze me was, I'm going to say a kid, but a student would sit an exam at GCSE at the age of 16, and then they'd come to us having sat the best kind of assessment, or what everybody's telling us is the best assessment of where they're at, and at that point in their stage for maths, English, and everything else that goes with it. And when they come to college, and they'd say, right, you need to do a diagnostic of where you're at. And I'd be like, they've just done one. They've just done one there.
But Steve, they didn't have the results though, did they?
And they'll go, yeah, but they don't necessarily have the results yet. And also, if we want to get access, not necessarily to the result in terms of a C or a number as it is now, what we then have to do is to find out actually what bits and areas they were better at than others, so do a real breakdown of it. You've then got to pay an awarding body to get that information.
Yeah.
Right, so put that, and this is not even, and again, I feel like I'm going to be criticising a lot. I'm not, because I think it's a system in the process. That knowledge belongs to the student. That information, they've just sat that exam. They've been through all of that turmoil and the horrific stuff. Don't even get me started on exams. But they've gone through that turmoil and they've got that result. And yet, the people who've basically made money out of that exam system, rightly or wrongly, then charge an additional thing for other people to access that student's information and detail. How? By shifting it to what we've just talked about, where the student then takes ownership of that information. Just as one bit, what would that do in terms of disruption? It is like, I liken it to, how would the networks such as O2, Free, and everybody else react if we gave Wi-Fi away and data access away for free?
It's a challenge. Even if we just start there, Steve, and like think about that level of information and the change to like just getting access to that data for students. If you think about like adding what you've just said there about students do something, study something, take the exam, and then you need that granular level of detail. It's almost like they don't even have access to that post. It's not just about access for a college. It's them as a student don't have access to what they've learned and don't have access to credentials or credibility, and then therefore to check learning. What I would argue here is that there's an opportunity to move towards like this Web3 stuff would allow for what we would probably call decentralized credentials. I think that's a phrase that Dan's talked about this before. Like when we're talking about, and it does a few things here. First one, and the first one I really want to mention on, it's about drilling down into, do they understand geometry? And then within geometry, do they understand area of within a certain shape, and then angles around a point, and all those like little granular details? There's what we would probably call the atomization of education, and like as in to break it down into its little atomic pieces. That good teaching and learning understands that you need to be able to understand number, the concept of number, before you can do any kind of multiplication. So if you don't understand number and the place value, you can't do anything to. So it's like it's building blocks. What I'm saying here is that, and I'm going a long way around this, sorry lads, but what I'm trying to say is that decentralization and credentials like this allows you to have like tiny little bits that you can work on at once and have an understanding, and a real granular understanding, because you're using high-powered data sets to be able to give you that information at the tip of your tongue. You're not having to do a spreadsheet. I remember being at secondary school and having a spreadsheet with all the skills that the students need to be able to develop, and I'd colour them in each half term. And somehow that colouring in gave me an understanding of how many students were red on that, how many students were amber on it, how many students were green on it. And then when I did another diagnostic test, it'd give me that more. But it was a manual process. This allows for like machine learning and all the things that go with it that are already working in Web 2. Sorry, I don't know if I've made sense in what I'm saying, but
okay, so that's going to disrupt massively, positively for some, but negatively for others. It's really going to change it, and we can go backwards, but I'm going to put this to Dan. Dan, you probably the closest and the more recent in terms of secondary education, and I suppose, and still
because I'm younger than you two.
No, mate, you're just
very flattering. Very flattering.
Still in
Sorry?
education. Just still in education. I've just realised.
But let's make it clear. I am closer to my own secondary school education than you two are as well. That's
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there.
You are accurate. You might.
It's a shame, because if we were to do a poll about this, I think genuinely, I don't know if they'd put you as the youngest. I don't think viewers would put you as the youngest. Let's do a poll about it. Who looks the youngest?
Yeah, let's put that out there on social media. That's going to be pretty horrific. To be fair, that could be really bad for us. Somebody's going to have a bad weekend out there and a bad night if somebody says, "Let's not put how old we look." Literally, I have to wear really dark rimmed glasses to hide the bags under my eyes now. But so, from somebody who is still in education and is somebody who's been in secondary education before they moved into the FE sector, the disruption then to the awarding bodies, but what is the disruption then to the whole ethos of how we deliver education? Because if you think, so currently a scheme of work is created before the even students get to it generally. And maybe I'm surmising, and actually it's not accurate, this, and it's probably not the case in all organisations. But as a generalisation, a scheme of work is created with all the different weeks and the different sessions within a week that's going to be covered. Okay? But if a teacher knows every single area of development and every strength, what does that mean in terms of the disruption of the order of that, the starting points knowing, and also then really having to create a real personalised learning experience for every single student? Because you cannot say, I didn't know what the strengths and areas for improvement, I'm just kind of developing as I go along, because you've got it in front of you. You have to really because so if somebody's really good at something, do they have to actually attend that lesson? Why do they have to sit in the lesson if they're really, really strong at it? And you're only covering one bit of content that they've already demonstrated they're really good at. Why do they have to attend? Would you not be bored? Would you want to attend that? But how our education system is built so they all attend? What does that look like?
Yeah, and I don't think you necessarily need blockchain technology to for that
but I'm just thinking, but it will
to change as well.
It'll be
Yeah.
to the board to add to the reasons why we shouldn't.
I think for me, I see the disruption coming from if, like, fair enough, at the minute you go, right, oh, here on my CV I've got 8 to C's or 9 to 4s or whatever in my GCSEs. I've got a few A levels. Fair enough. We all know that a lot of employers will glance over them, but it won't be part of a deciding factor for many jobs. If then a student is taking a digital wallet to an employer or is sharing the digital wallet with an employer, and the employer goes, right, I can see an atomized view of all of the skills, all of the credentials that you've built up over the years, and they're verified through references recorded on the blockchain, so we can see how robust they are. It's then what the employer then does as well in terms of picking and choosing what they need, and actually then the learning curve for the education system. And I think this gets into another big topic it'd be great to talk about in terms of decentralized, meaning away from the education mainstream, not necessarily based on Web3 technology, but actually if it does that mean that then we have to go, or we're more inclined to go to a more menu-based style of school, or a more personalized learning style of school where a student can go, this is what I want to be, or this is the kind of area I want to be in, so I need to build up experiences in this area. I need to build up the knowledge and the experiences, and then so does school become a lot more a mix between the academic and the experiential building of those skills. And I think I've mentioned it before, but I got a chance to interview one of my childhood friends last year who when I was 16 we both worked in McDonald's together when I was in sixth form, and he's now a big shot editor. In fact, he's just won a Royal Television Award a couple of weeks ago for his editing of His Dark Materials, the HBO special. And he talks about, so I was asking him, like, because he wasn't particularly great at school, didn't come out with great grades. Asking what helped him, and what kind of later on made him an attractive prospect with the skills to be able to go into that line of work. And his essential answer was, and you can probably guess it, he was out every weekend with his mates recording, like taking a camcorder out and recording him and his mates at the local skate park. They used to go like skateboarding, and then they'd go back to his house and they'd stick it on whatever basic movie maker there was on his computer, and they'd play around with it and stick some music over the top of it, and it was that prepared him for a really successful career. And I think if you take elite sports people, it's what they were doing after school, before school, on a weekend on the field that was preparing them for that. And I suppose it to a certain extent as well, if you take successful academics, it's not necessarily what they were doing 9 till 4 in school. It was the extra stuff they were doing on top of that as well. It was because
10,000 hours thing, isn't it? The 10,000 hours, yeah.
It's how do we record that? How do we encapsulate that? How do we give a credential to an experience, or to a manifest skill, I guess? Yeah.
Are you struggling to manage your school's Chromebooks and looking for a solution?
Come full circle, check out the Vault episode with the team from Visor for features and why it can make a difference to managing your devices.
Visor integrates with the Google Admin Console to keep track of your Chromebook inventory and repairs. For an exclusive Edufuturists offer for 20% off for your first year, go to visor.cloud/edu. That's VIZOR.cloud/edu.
Yeah.
It's I guess to just I guess to come back to the original question, I guess do we have to have an education system then, or do we need an education system that's going to cater to the learning that goes on beyond the classroom, or does the classroom become an environment where, a bit like Agora School, where they got rid of classrooms and said, right, work on your project. What's your passion project? Work on it, and let's fit in the knowledge around it.
I think if you look at like how you learn now, Dan, like you're not in formal school anymore. You're not, well, I'm in terms of like you don't go to classes and stuff. I know that you're doing like online diplomas and stuff like that at the moment. But let's think about even just that. You're doing an online diploma that you do at a certain time, but you can actually do some of the learning and reading outside of that time. You will pick and choose. Let's just think about the conversations that we've just had about Web3. Nobody taught me that. I never got into a night class to teach me how to understand this stuff. I will play around on an app. I'll watch a YouTube video. I might have a discussion on an online forum. I might join a Discord channel. I might be involved in multiple different learning streams to help me kind of understand this. And I think about, I was talking with a college today about like true blended learning and how we can make some of this blended learning and some of this flipped learning work. Well, actually, the students do this. Like, watch young people now. Like, they don't go to a class to learn how to get really good at World of Warcraft or Minecraft. They Google it. They watch a YouTube video. People are making millions and billions of dollars on teaching people how to do this. And I think about like Allison.com and LinkedIn Learning and all the others that exist. People are atomizing, like I was talking about earlier, and like kind of really honing in on what do I want to learn. We had the conversation, I think, before, Dan. It might have been offline actually, where we talked about it's really almost impossible now to become an expert in marketing, for example. But if you want to learn about marketing, the likelihood is you want to learn about influencer marketing or affiliate marketing or SEO or whatever else that looks like. And as you're doing that, you want to become an expert in that field. So rather than going and doing spending 40 grand on a degree in a BA in marketing, actually you spend £1,000 on a course, an online course that you do at your own time, your own pace, that you can go back to and refer to again once you've done with it. We've dropped down materials that are relevant because it's taught by industry experts right now. The Category Pirates people talk about it as well, don't they? Like you want somebody who is an affiliate marketer who does this day in, day out, who's teaching a course, rather than an old stuffy professor who is so far from the chalk face that it changes it. And this is what the technology is allowing for, I think. And the blockchain then becomes the verification of that makes it credible, because it's shared, because it's not just one person doing a course. You get that external verification because it's held in multiple places.
I went back and I think I was re-listening to I think it was the interview we did with Rob Hoban from Agora, probably a couple of years ago now. And there was something that I'd missed at the time, but I was like, and you just reminded me of it again there, Ben. The fact that so they like I said before, they don't have classrooms, they don't have timetables, but they'll have a bit of a, what do they call them, a coach or someone who they meet with every morning, and then that person will be like, right, where are you at with your project? What you're going to be doing today? Just kind of helps them kind of focus on it. But I'm in the interview, Rob Hoban, the manager there, talks about that the students, if they're working on something, a project, and they need an expert, the chances are that expert is not going to be in the school, because you just can't do that. Like you just can't. So they put them in contact. Say, well, actually there's a guy who works for a company in the city. Why don't you give him a ring? Why don't we arrange a meeting with him? Why don't we? And the fact that the school is pointing the students out to the real world expert. And I suppose just thinking back, and I'm sure we've talked about this recently, back to, I think we talked about it with Nicholas Cole, that you might have a teacher, let's say you've got a history teacher, they might have went to university and they might have specialized in one area of history. they might have come out with a pretty crap degree in the end, but might have a passion for a certain area of history or whatever. But they're teaching you across a whole wide remit of history within the curriculum. They're not the expert. They're not. So you, even though, and I know we talk about kind of that dichotomy of the knowledge-rich curriculum versus a skills curriculum, which we know doesn't fully exist. It is to a certain extent a false dichotomy.
Yeah.
But that a lot of that whole knowledge-rich curriculum philosophy and way of schooling comes from the idea of the teacher being the expert at the front of the room, and they invest time in their teachers. To be fair to them, they allow their teachers to do further training. The ones that do it well anyway, give them time to do deeper reading into the subject. But it doesn't matter how much that teacher's going to do that. They're never going to be the world leading expert on every single area that they're teaching. And nor should they be, when actually you could just say to that student, why don't you email the leading expert on that and ask if you can pick his brains on it? Why don't you do the course he's got online?
Yeah. And rightly so, because I think rightly, I think like nobody is going to be that expert. And I think that's a lie. Nobody's going to be an expert on all of it. And that's what we're saying. So whether it's affiliate marketing or whether it's history, like it's going to be, nobody can be the full expert on it. So I think the internet technologies allow some of that. But I think as we tie it into like Web3 and this idea of decentralization, increasingly what we're talking about here is an idea that the education, who does the education, and where that education comes from, and then how that is badged or certified or verified, changes, doesn't it, through using Web3 technology?
Yeah, I think, and in fact, I just thought as well, like if you want to go to traditional education, where education started back in Greece, 3,000 years ago, that's literally how they did it. If you were a scholar and you wanted the knowledge of a certain philosopher, you went and joined their school. You travelled. I mean, you had to have money in those days to be a scholar because you weren't working. But you travelled to the expert you wanted to learn under, and that's why like these philosophers had their own schools. They founded their own schools to pass on the philosophy they were practicing. I think for me, what it does is, and I think you touched on it there, Ben, is there's a monopoly on education, isn't there, in terms of, for want of a better term, verified education. Like I can go on YouTube, I can learn this, I can learn that, I can do a course where somebody gives me a nice certificate from some website, but actually the kind of, well, if we look at the education system, has a monopoly on kind of the mainstream rigorous education where you get then an actual verified certificate from an awarding body that is recognized by the education system. And I think for me, when that starts to change, when maybe the technology can support the rigor of an eccentric, and by that I mean like an educational provider that's not within the center, but is actually, and we can come on and talk about places like Synthesis, Kidauto. Once somebody can get a qualification or a verified credential from an independent provider that also stands the test of being robust and accepted by companies, by employers, then I think that's when the disruption happens, because then why would you want your child, or why would you want to flock towards the central system when actually you could go and specialize it? Like for Synthesis, for example, if you wanted to really, really hone your skills at problem solving because you wanted to be the next Elon Musk, I could go and spend my time at Synthesis, and then the credential they give me, well, in fact, you can do that now. You don't need the technology, do you? Like it's just more the awareness, isn't it? If you went to a company and went, look, I I didn't go to mainstream school. I went online to Elon Musk's protege school called Synthesis. Most employers would be like, "What? So you got no GCSEs?" But actually, if you sat them down and went, "Look, this is what it is. This is who founded it. This is the type of thing we did, and these are now the problem-solving skills that I've got," then that's when they'll want you. Wouldn't they?
Let's flip that. So obviously, I work for an employer, and we recruit and everything else. Is it not the responsibility of necessarily the person who is going to be the employee, the candidate, but also to move away from archaic and sometimes real, not great ways of actually trying to recruit people by saying, "Oh, show me your credentials and your CV and tell me how your experience of this." And the majority of people can bluff an interview if you ask them based on, "Tell me this, and here's a question, do this." Where actually, how can you go through that process and say, "Well, how would you apply yourself?" I know you, because not everybody's done it. If you haven't got the experience, how can you apply to a context of this and kind of the experiential stuff of, if this was the situation, what would you do? Or here's some. This is what from. Show me the process of what you do there, rather than. Can you tell me what safeguarding means, and have you ever dealt with a safeguarding situation?
But then if you think about that, like we've gone through interviewing processes for staff and whatever else very recently, and the amount of people where you ask them for an example of when you've shown initiative, when you've solved a problem, when you have had to deal with a challenge that you had to think outside the box. Like anybody who's been in mainstream education, or no, not anybody. Lots of people from mainstream education tell you they're struggling because it's not part and parcel of the diet in a mainstream school. Like I talked a lot about my two girls. Neve's 11, Martha's 7. Neve goes to high school in the UK in September. Neve is she's in the top class at primary school. They're preparing for their SATs, basically end of primary school test. And I'm literally, she's not doing them until May. She's now, beginning of March, when this is recorded, has had a week of practice SATs. And these week of practice SATs are basically, so she learns how much time to spend on each question, to consider like the little nuances of the wording of the question. She's being taught exam technique, and she's being taught how to pass and get the highest score that she can, because somehow that is important. And then once May's finished, once she's done these SATs, they have all these projects to do. They get all these things where they get ready for high school, where they start thinking about problems, where they start thinking about what it means to, like, as in projects on topics or things that they can't fit into the curriculum because there isn't time for, because they're preparing for SATs. And I just thought to myself the other day, and this is not school's fault. This is. I'm not even sure if this is exam. I don't know whose fault this is. It's somebody's flipping fault. It absolutely grinds my gears that my 11-year-old is thinking about how to pass this exam, and that's the important thing. It's just bollocks, isn't it? For me, it is. I'm sorry for those people that are listening to this and thinking that exams are the right way forward, and that getting students in those pressure situations. I just think it's crap, because they're never going to need to. They're not going to learn. It's not the learning that's happening, is it, Dan?
Well, I think it's interesting because you learn knowledge. I suppose you can. There's a pleasure in knowledge in itself, but for most of us, 90% of the time, we learn knowledge to apply it. And if we are spending time in our schooling system to just showing students how to apply it to an exam situation, which is, let's be honest, a one-off situation that they'll never have to repeat ever again, when actually they could be applying that knowledge to real-world scenarios.
Let me give you an example of that, Dan. Like, so one of the words that Neve's having to learn at the moment for spellings is ambiguity. Great word, like vocabulary. Love it. So I said to her, what does ambiguity mean? And she went, that doesn't matter. I said, what do you mean it doesn't matter? She says, all I need to be able to do is spell it. And I kind of lost my shit. Because I thought to myself, oh, whoa, that isn't what I'm about. So you can imagine when I was like, so right, we need to consider what ambiguity means. I want you to think about it in the context of a sentence. Where have you heard it? What does it mean? And then we started talking about why there was no ambiguity in what I expected her to learn from that. And it sounds really like I'm being a forceful parent, but that's a perfect example of it. And that's just one. And they're doing it all the time. Tell me why you're doing that. Does that make sense? Were you going to apply that in real life? How many of us have sat in a lesson? And I taught RE, right? So like, these questions that used to get asked to me all the time. I taught religious studies, and the kids used to say to me, "Yeah, but why do I need to know about this? When is this ever going to help me?" And I don't remember the last time I used Pythagoras' theorem. Just saying.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm on a soapbox.
No,
sorry,
it's interesting.
It links into what Joe the Mike McCourt kind of conversation. I'm going to take a punt. 165, 166, something like that. It must have been about. It must.
Yeah,
have been,
166.
Right. Okay.
Well done.
Talking about, was it the title? This is really bad. I don't even know my own podcast. Wasn't it something like teach them what they don't know, or teach them what they need to know? And that whole process of the whole system is not set up to really think about it. It's basically, let's just teach them all of these different things in this order, and then let's give them exam practice so they can regurgitate it. And this guy's is an Ofsted inspector, and we're saying Ofsted are getting it wrong. But if he's it amazes me. Like, he talked about it was really good listen.
No, and I agree. And he was saying, you could tell he was passionate about maths, couldn't you? And he was bothered about students being able to understand maths in context and being able to apply it and make it make sense. I've just finished Imagine If by the late Sir Ken Robinson, finished by his daughter Kate Robinson. Absolutely recommend it to anybody who has got any vested interest in education. In fact, you don't even need to be a teacher or work in education. I think it's valid. And one of the analogies that he talks about is how schools essentially have become a factory. And we've talked about this before about exam factories or like this one. And he said, actually, it's more that they need to become like farms, as opposed to, if we're going to use that kind of analogy. And this idea of there is a real problem with, look at me, I'm going to get all deep and philosophical and even agricultural here. There's a problem when a soil has a monocrop and like this monoculture of like, if you just plow the ground and all it ever produces is one type of crop, then over time, the diversity that happens, the biodiversity that happens, the soil ruins, it becomes useless for it as a limited shelf life and a limited value. And he was likening that to education, that actually you should have a biodiversity and you should have a diversity within a curriculum. It's not all like this monoculture, everybody's going down this way. And I think Anna Fabrega used an illustration, didn't she, that Stephen Bartlett retweeted and put out on LinkedIn about what education is traditionally like, trying to create these aeroplanes. I probably should find it. I'll find it in a moment to share it. This idea of aeroplanes going one way as opposed to like in a line. And actually what we're talking about is that they need to find their own path, and that these students need to have an opportunity to have diversity and move off in different directions.
It's that thing of the education system values conformity, but the world values individuality, isn't it? It's that concept. Yeah. It's interesting, though, just to bring it back to the kind of the tokenization, I guess, of education as well. That, and with the Web3, I like that idea of students collecting. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I think when we start off doing something with a purpose, we have a goal, don't we? Now, obviously, for you, having a goal as a young child is pretty difficult, and they need to know the basics. But I think when you get to especially like young teenage level, there's still no goal. The goal is the exam, isn't it, within our traditional education system? But maybe it's the goal. The goal needs to change as well. Like the actual horizon for that learning. Where's it going to lead to? And that's when you almost give the student the agency to go, right, well, if that is the direction I'm going in, I don't know, a certain career, a certain sector, or certain type of person. It doesn't necessarily have to be a creator. The type of person I want to be a creative, for example. Then it's well, I need to go and collect what I need. I need to go and collect those credentials that I need. That's gonna, and like you said, Ben, we do that now, don't we? Like I know, Steve, you just started a course as well where we've went out and went, do you know what, I need that, or I'd like to have that, so I'll go and get it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of summed up here, isn't it? That image, like what if you can't see it on the screen for those people who are just listening. Anna Fabrega says fitting in pays off in school, standing out pays off in the real world, and this is what you're talking about, isn't it? It's like conformity, like always doing it a certain way versus this level of find your own path and solve problems and become and develop your own potential, which is a challenge because it's not factory farming, then, is it? It's not done in a certain way.
Exactly. Why are we cultivating our crop? Why are we saying that everything has to happen in rows and everybody has to do it in the same way, and we're creating drones when actually it's better to create? And I think I'm definitely. Apologies. I'm paraphrasing from somebody else, and I don't even know who. But this whole thing of, I think it might be even Tom Sherrington, who does have some traditional views around creating and it's more about teaching and learning, creating a rainforest of real green shoots of outstanding creativity and everything else. Because if you put them in a rows and say you have to do it this way, then they'll always follow that template and that whole thing. But if you say, well, have a think and what would you do differently, and have a think about it, you get some real shoots of amazing stuff back that just fire out from all different directions, but you don't get it by cultivating your crop because everything's in rows, and that's what we're creating. And it's only later on in life that people really start to gather their green shoots, and it's a shame.
It is Tom Sherrington. It is that level of. I love that as an analogy. So I suppose the idea of decentralization or Web3 in education. Let's be honest about this. I've been working with a college group, which will remain nameless, and I started talking about why. And they said like what's the net necessity for digital? Why does digital need to be as part of the curriculum? And I know Steve mentioned multiple times this idea of no need for a digital strategy. Actually, digital should be threaded through every strategy in education. And I've used that, must have used that 100 times, Steve, after I heard you say it. But I think, like I said to him, actually, digital innovation and disruption and what that's bringing is only getting faster, and education is running even slower, adopting that kind of stuff. And Web3 stuff is moving at a pace that you couldn't even begin to explain. There's new cryptocurrencies coming out every day. And Dan usually sends us a little message to say, "Oh, have you seen this one? It's moving. And what about this one? This is a good one." And that the conversations about new NFT projects or all this kind of stuff comes up, and yet nobody talks about it in mainstream education. It's not even on an agenda. Is it on a curriculum? Is Web3 on anybody's curriculum?
Literally, who would write it? Because it wouldn't go to the experts. That's a problem. Somebody with not necessarily an understanding of it at the writing, the specification be out of date by the time it's even written. That's the worry, isn't it? Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. It really is, and I think let's wait. Do we wait for part 3, 4, and 5? This is the thing where we unpick it, but it applies to so much, and it goes back to the whole thing of people talk about the lack of money in education. No, there isn't. It's like money in football. There is money in education, like there is money in football, but it's going to the wrong places. And that whole thing of, the Premier League, let's take it to football and league sport. The high end has to fund and support the low end. And people says, it's very, very different. It's all business. The fact is, do the awarding bodies, out of the great profits, but they're successful businesses, do they put the money back into support education? And rightly so. Is that a system where we kind of talk about grassroots of education rather than grassroots of football? And they have to take back some of the stuff that they're making to support some of these ideas and initiatives and everything else. And maybe that's not the right way to go about it, but something has to change, because at the minute the money's going outside of the school environment and isn't going to really support the students. That really, it's their education. Like, we can talk about all they want, but it is their education, and they don't even have control over it at all.
Nope. And they don't get to do what they want to do. There's no level of agency and choice. We dictate their time of schooling. We dictate their style of schooling. We dictate their subjects, the minute details within those subjects, when they sit exams, how they're examined. And we talk about neurodiversity. We talk about inclusion. We talk about equality and diversity. And all of these things rightly should be top of everybody's agenda. We talk about differentiation. We talk about additional needs. Yet we just lump everybody into the same system and expect them to learn the same way. And I think it's wrong. And I think we need a revolution's underway, and it is underway. And it is pioneers like Sir Ken Robinson, pioneers like Bob Harrison, pioneers like Jim Knight, Valerie Hannon, hundreds and thousands of people that have gone before who are championing this and saying this has got to change. We've got to move and do something different. So,
and I think there's a lot of challenges as well, isn't there? And I think even we're talking about Web3 technology, there's still a lot of issues that need ironed out. It's not a perfect technology solution by any means at the moment. And there's lots of things that we haven't mentioned on this podcast tonight because we're trying to explore it. We're trying to be positive in our exploration, but there's some things that probably won't work. There's a lot of things that probably wouldn't work. Like, one of the things I keep coming back to in my head is the if we were to tokenize and have decentralized credentials, where does that robustness come from? Like, if it's somebody in their loft creating their own course and sticking an NFT on it and going, have a credential for this, who says that what he's offering is any good? Also, that it could be good that week, but next week it could be outdated. And so what is that credential worth? Could say that about mainstream exams as well, to be fair. But there's a lot of issues with it, I think. And also, to be fair on schools, as somebody who's worked in schools and worked in colleges, there's a lot of restrictions. There's a lot more freedom than I think schools have got a lot more freedom than I think they realise they've got. But at the same time, they're restricted heavily financially, restricted heavily on those dreaded league tables that we talk about in terms of exams. And so I personally, because I'm coming from a school background and I know head teachers and I've been on leadership team with people who drive these agendas of becoming more efficient at what they do to get the best exam result out of students. And they come from a good place. They come from a really good place because the idea is you give these students the best results and it's going to open up more opportunities for them later in their life. Like, it's not like they're thinking, oh, let's force them into this exam sausage factory and actually do them any harm. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's like, I was of that mindset, so I still get it. I still think I remember thinking to myself, that's the best opportunity you can give a child at school, is that they leave with the best results possible.
Yeah.
And so if that means you've got to put the screws on them from time to time and get the best results out of them, then it's going to be good for them in the long term. Now I think, you know what, people who work in that situation, that it's such a narrow, confined vision of education that in most cases is the best outcome. And so they just get better and better and better at it. It's a bit like, I'm going to use a brilliant analogy here, but if you ever watch In the Factory with Greg Wallace on BBC Two, they
This is going to be well over the edge of the US listeners, isn't it?
have you seen it?
No.
There's a Greg Wallace who hosts Mastermind. He's got a series where he goes, not Mastermind.
Mastermind.
What was going on here? My mind.
What's it called?
MasterChef.
MasterChef.
MasterChef. He
Eating out of his spoon as he's asking the questions, right?
but he essentially every episode
he's got sausage patty on the brain.
every episode he goes round a different factory, and it's not the most thrilling TV, to be fair.
I hope this is a good story because you fill it up.
The whole like pretty much every factory he goes into, somebody brags to him, "Oh, this process here used to take 17 minutes, and we got it down to 9 minutes, and that meant we could make 100 more million
sausages
products that year and get them out, and it's increased our profit." And it's like, this is he gets very enthusiastic. This is an amazing bit of just because of this, they included this one little bit of new technology, or they did a bit of design thinking on this area of the mechanism, and it's totally transformed their business. And that's what education does. We sit around and we go, right, how can we get that little bit more out of the production line? How can we? And I think, who can blame the system for ending up like that with the system that we've got? And I think when we sit here and talk about new technology is going to come, it's going to be amazing. We've got to think creatively. I think the average normal teacher in a school would just be like, yeah, whatever, mate. Like, that's just never going to happen. Like, have you seen what we're working with? Have you seen? And so I kind of get both sides of it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And I suppose,
are you thinking about going into politics?
No, I think sometimes I love exploring the utopian side of things. Where could things be if it was the best it could be for our students and for society? And I don't think I ever want to stop doing that. And that's why I come on here every week, so we can explore that. And I think that's valuable. But also, it's hard. It's really tricky, and we're seeing that innovation happening in schools that are starting from scratch, who are moving away from the more mainstream side of things, and that's where the innovation's happening. We're not seeing that much innovation happening in long established schools that are part of the system and been part of the system for years. It's tricky for them, I guess.
Yeah, it is. I think there's loads we could go into. I think there is a part 3, isn't there? There is a part 3.
We haven't even gotten to the metaverse. That was going to be my conclusion. I think the metaverse is where it could happen.
Don't mention it. Let's do that in part 3, Dan.
Yeah,
that's the arena where you can go and collect them. Sorry, Stephen.
Let's leave them wanting more. Always, Daniel.
Yeah.
Let's leave it.
Leave them wanting more sausages. That's what it is. It's all about more sausages.
Yeah, and we'll talk
And on
about
that,
Mastermind in the next episode.
Mastermind in the metaverse with Greg
Megamind.
Wallace. Oh,
but yeah, I think there's so much more to cover, and so much more exploration. But I think, like with everything, we openly and actively, when we put on social media, we do get some engagement. But we're really interested to see what other people think of it as well. This is our conversation. This is what we think it is. But if you want to come on and discuss with the three of us next time we discuss Web3, come on. Reach out to us and everything else if you're listening, or see it on social, or just comment. What do you think? Do you disagree with us? Do you think we're absolutely talking bollocks and it's just wrong, or is there some other perspective that we're just missing? I suppose is a thing to consider. But yeah, I think that's the thing, that we're just chewing the fat and really enjoying it. but there are so many perspectives, and we're not naive enough to think that we've got all the answers, and our answers are always necessarily right. So yeah, come on and let us know what you think.
Do you know what I think we should also mention here, and hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, just so we kind of wrap this to a close, and just mention that the awards, 2022 awards, I think we kind of have intimated that things are starting to move on that. Initial emails and discussions have started going out, but we think we've got a date, haven't we? So we've got a date to put in your diaries to work out for. They're looking at me as if to say, "Don't say it, Ben. Don't say it." Can I say it? Can I say it?
What happens if everything changes? Just do it.
Just do it. I've done it now.
We'll
Sorry.
better.
So 30th of June, 2022 awards. So keep things keep that date in your diary. Sorry, I'm definitely gonna get in trouble after this. I feel like this is my marriage as well. I do that. Put my foot in it. 30th of June 2022 Edufuturists Awards. And we are looking forward to celebrating the very best in education as well. So yeah, look out for that. More and more information coming out. So what a good episode, gentlemen. A good episode. Thank you. Thank you for this. Episode 171 is done and dusted.
Yeah, and hope to see some of listeners, and we're in different guises at Bet next week. So yeah, look forward to seeing everybody, and reach out. So come and say hello if you listen. We always love people surprising us saying I listen. It's always still surprises us, and yeah, we'll see you all down there. But yeah, been a pleasure. It's been great tonight. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, lads.
Cheers.